What actually kept you going and keep on trying?
Seeing it work in other organizations, but seeing companies succeed that had a worse product and worse services than us.
All right, Cody, welcome to the show. Great to have you on. To start off, can you tell us about your business, what you guys are doing, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. So Codelitt, we're basically a outsourced R&D shop. We help large corporations build new software at the speed, with the speed, talent, and technology of a startup. So we provide services everywhere from early on, like ideation and problem discovery for our customers, clear through to the design, engineering. Engineering is a huge part of what we do. Obviously, software engineering accounts for 95% of our total gross receipts, and then kind of the ongoing incubation of those ideas once they've been launched into the marketplace. So we started about 6 years ago. I think we've been nearly doubling in size every year. I think we're around 60, 65 people this year currently, and hiring for a bunch of positions, hiring for outbound sales actually right now. So if any of your listeners are outbound sales, which I imagine they are, you can apply. I think it's codelitt-incubator.workable.com. So we do have outbound positions out there right now. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of basically it. A lot of our customers are large organizations, large corporations. We work a little bit in the middle market, with maybe companies that have 100 million in revenue up, but a large percentage of our customers are in the Fortune 500.
Cool. And Cody, you're the founder. This is your company from day one. Is that right?
Yeah, I am the founder. I actually graduated school like right when the recession was pretty bad, and a lot of my friends weren't really getting work or anything. And I had found an opportunity in Argentina. I didn't speak Spanish or anything, but I thought, all right, well, cool. No one else is finding work here in the States, so I might as well move abroad for a couple of years. I did that, and I went and worked for a bunch of startups down in Argentina, and working in marketing actually, and building seeing how products got built. And then I went and worked for a large organization, large enterprise in the States, trying to help them kind of get their digital innovation off the ground. And I saw really, I guess, the big challenge, right? Which was these large companies not being able to move quickly, not being able to use the technology, really getting a lot of their market share taken up by smaller startups, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think there's also a good opportunity to help them kind of to be able to compete in that space. And so that's originally why I founded the company. So I just thought there was a lot of these larger companies were being serviced by, very large consulting firms that were not much different than they were. So, a lot of the projects and a lot of the new products or software products that they were trying to launch were, $20 million and would take them 3 years to build. And from the time they started to the time they ended, it was almost irrelevant what they'd been working on in the first place. And so I really thought, being able to take some of the startup principles that we learned, building products in a smaller environment and applying that to the larger organizations was a good fit. And so far it has been. We have a lot of large organizations that are really excited to speak with us, and it's definitely a good hook and good foot in the door.
Yeah, for sure. Our audience is all about like cold email and cold outreach. At what point did you use that strategy to grow your business and acquire new customers?
We relied a lot on my relationships when we first started. And that really started to become an apparent problem when I kind of saturated my Rolodex, so to speak. There's only so much you can do with utilizing your own relationships without starting to come across as maybe a grifter, so to speak. So you have to remember, no matter how long no matter how much you're working in business, I guess, you have to remember that the relationships you build are still really important, right? And if so people start to feel used by those relationships matter very much less. So we got to the point where I was like, okay, anybody who's actually interested has already bought in, and anybody who's not interested, if I keep bugging them, I'm going to lose that relationship, which, I don't want to do. So that's really where I started realizing, okay, we're going to have to start reaching out and expanding our network and going outside. And we started working with an outbound group, and that really wasn't really the right fit for us. What we found to be a lot more effective was doing that internally. We just found that our internal people were focused on us, focused on our company, focused on our message and understood our message, understood what kind of customers we wanted to speak to a lot better. Mm-hmm. And we're able to spend the time doing that research that was really required. So that's why we started, basically. It's a really long way to tell you that annoyed all my friends and family, professional network enough. And so it's time to start expanding that network.
Yeah. I think it's awesome because a lot of people are exactly at this stage when they start outbound. They exhausted all their sort of like close relationship. They don't want to keep on burgering them, but they still need new leads.
Sure.
That's a cool thing.
Now, it's interesting because not everybody would turn to outbound in order to generate new leads. At that moment, I know a few other businesses that went heavy into, let's say, networking, for example, because if you're used to going with your personal Rolodex, as you said, the next logical step would be to get more personal connections. But in your case, it sounds like you sort of skipped over that and went direct to outbound. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say more or less. Well, we have one customer that's in Miami, but we didn't meet them in Miami. We actually started working with their group out of Wisconsin first. So we just have never really found a lot of customers in our local market. So networking, I guess for us wasn't an option. I mean, I tried to do a little bit of networking. It almost felt a little empty because everyone was there trying to do the same thing, right? To pitch their services. And I don't know. It didn't feel very effective. It didn't feel very, realistic or not realistic, but it didn't feel very authentic to me.
I have sort of this idea that if you go into a networking room, it's basically a room full of people who don't know how to advertise, and they're there to sort of push everything. And it's part of the reason why I'm in outbound, because it's beautiful in that way that you can, kind of hand select who you talk to. But was there any other channels early on that made an impact?
Yeah, inbound made a pretty big impact. So if you can go to our website, I think codelitt.com/blog, and you can see we have a lot of content. We also have a lot of kind of high quality inbound resources. I'm trying to think. I can't remember. I think it's codelitt.com/resources. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to get anything. But if you want to see an example, we have really high quality content, white papers that we've spent a lot of time developing, and kind of the thought leadership and stuff like that. We have, to download those, you obviously put in your name and your email, and that really starts a conversation for our outbound sales. Although it is coming inbound, it'll first kind of bounce through an outbound person, qualify the lead to start talking with them, and then they go to an account executive. And our blog was actually what resulted in one of our biggest customers to date. And just somebody had found an article that I'd written, can't even remember where they'd found it, and they'd reached out. And those are obviously great leads. The problem I find with inbound is that we haven't, and it could just be us, I'm not saying it's always this case, but for us and for our market, we've had a hard time building a consistent, repeatable pipeline with inbound. Where with outbound, it's kind of a numbers game. We can do the math backwards based on our funnel. We know that it'll convert, this will convert at this percentage, this will convert at this percentage, et cetera, I guess backwards. And we can kind of work our way back on those numbers and know that, okay, if we want to get to this number, we need to have this many leads. We need to be making this many calls, this many cold emails, et cetera. And so for us, that's been more repeatable. I'm not saying it can't be repeatable. The inbound can't be repeatable, but The inbound was great when it happened. It's a super warm lead. It's a really hot lead, because they're coming to you. They want to speak with you. So it's a really hot lead, but it just isn't as repeatable. At least we haven't figured out how to make it as repeatable.
Right.
Would you be okay to share the sort of like numbers that you have in order for people, because it's very successful for you. You're able to build your business on it. You're doubling every year. So would you be able to sort of like share what sort of number you're having so people can also see like, oh, I need that much, or, I'm doing well, I'm not doing that well?
Yeah, man, I wish I don't have them off the top of my head. If we had our director of business development here, I know he would. I can tell you it's hundreds of emails for one lead. It's probably, maybe it's close to 100 emails for one lead that kind of starts to go through the funnel. And then the numbers get a little bit better. But the numbers at the top of we have kind of a mixed approach. We have kind of our select targeted accounts. And for those accounts, our outbound guys will do a lot of research, deep research, and they'll be hitting several different people in the same company. They'll be trying to talk to several different people across the organization, and talk to them within the same company. Those results are obviously always going to be a lot better. Maybe you have, 1 in 20 that turns into some sort of lead that, starts to work its way down the funnel. Yeah. Then we have kind of a more shotgun approach, which is, I think a little wider on. That's probably, honestly, it's maybe maybe it's a little better than 1 out of 100, but it's a numbers game. It definitely is a numbers game.
Sure. And with the highly targeted accounts that are getting, let's say, 1 out of 20 become a lead, what's going on there? Is it they're a much better fit and therefore they need what you have to offer and they're more likely to turn into a lead? Or maybe it's more of the message. The message is more carefully written because of all the research.
Can I choose both or all of the above? Yeah. So I think it's both. The targeted customers are generally targeted because we know they're doing something in the space or they're trying to do what we provide. Generally, we're taking more time to understand their business, to understand their goals and their objectives. I mean, I had a conversation with a CTO. I reached out directly to the CTO of a very large company that was really struggling with innovation, that was in the news a lot, about their failings with innovation. And I brought it up and said, hey, I grew up with this brand. I've always really loved this company. You guys obviously, I understand you guys have had a lot of issues in the past.
Okay.
And you're getting beat up on this. I think we can help. And sharing a personal story about how, I'd grown up with the brand and et cetera, or whatever it was. I don't know. He answered. We had several conversations and it didn't end up leading anywhere, but not through any fault of the lead generation process. I mean, it was a quick answer. We got a response within a couple of days. We set up several meetings. It just ended up being the right fit in the end of the day. They were looking for a slightly different model than what we provided.
Sure.
But yeah, so the targeted ones, I mean, are by far in a way, a much more successful.
So it sounds like you might give your sales team the advice of whenever you can identify, let's say, a hot lead or an account that would be phenomenal to land, go ahead and take a whole lot extra time to research and craft highly personalized emails. Because A, they're worth it, and B, it's going to improve the chances of them turning into a lead.
Sure.
For the others that may be a good fit, take a little bit of a wider approach and sort of have 2 different campaigns going on, the highly targeted and then the slightly wider net.
Yeah. What we do with the wider net is, by far and away, the more targeted, the more custom the message, it's going to be, there's no doubt in my mind. Yeah. I don't have the exact numbers, but I can tell you 1 out of 20, 1 out of 15 versus 1 out of 100 is obviously
big deal.
Is a big difference. You can't spend that much time on every single outbound account. I think it'll be, sometimes you do find interest with kind of the more broad approach. What we do try to do is we still try to target by like job position. So we will try to target by job position and industry. So there's still a semi-custom kind of message that's going out, right? So maybe if it's a R&D director in, I don't know, in the music space, we'll target maybe something recently that has disrupted the music industry, from the software side. Make sure to include that in the message. Ask them what they're doing in response to that, et cetera. Kind of gear our, maybe say, point to a customer. Well, we don't actually have a customer in the music space, but, if we do have a customer in the music space, point to somebody in the music space that we've worked with in the past. So yeah, so there is still a semi-targeted approach. And I think your numbers will go up by then. We're still getting a handle on it ourselves, and we're still kind of refining it. It's a constant measurement. Okay, this isn't working. This is working. And every company is different, but so far that's been the direction we're heading. And we're getting better and better results the longer we're at it.
That's good. I think the idea of targeting specific campaigns by the industry is kind of exciting because it can personalize the message much better than the traditional templates out there, but it's also sort of easier to do that at scale. So you can kind of save a lot of time while getting that relevant message across, as long as you're willing to break that down for different industries.
Sure.
I love that's a great takeaway.
One thing, and I mentioned this earlier, one thing that I also have noticed that if companies have the resources, and generally I think with sales, you can find the resources because there is a direct ROI. But I will say that we found, and we're starting to see much better results now that we are starting to hire dedicated outbound people that are apart from our account executives, for what it's worth. Because our account executives, we found, have so much time in the accounts and in the sales process, et cetera, that they aren't able to dedicate the time to do that research and to tailor those campaigns. Recently, we've started to hire for that. And so hopefully, if we check back in 6 months, I hope to have much better results to share with you guys. We've noticed that we just don't have, without the focus on that, that's been having somebody that specific focus is on that. It's really been necessary.
Kind of like the Aaron Ross predictable revenue idea of just sort of compartmentalizing the different steps there. Because you're right, it is kind of a completely different job description to be able to prospect and, start conversations and then close them.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, absolutely. So we don't have the results quite yet, but we're hoping to see really good results.
It sounds like it's moving the right way.
Yeah, it sounds like you're on the right track. At the beginning, were you straight away successful with outbound, or did you have to handle like a lot of rejection and lots of iteration and trying?
It was a lot of rejection for a lot of time. I don't know how much you know this, but in the this may be something that's very regionally specific. But I'm from Utah, and in Utah, a lot of people are Mormons, and they go on these missions where they go for 2 years and they just get doors slammed in their face constantly, knocking on doors trying to convert people.
Right.
And they're well known. It's like well known across several different business industries that it's a great place to hire salespeople because they're so used to that rejection. I'm not, and I wasn't used to that rejection, and so it took me a very long time to be able to build up that. It was really discouraging. It was really discouraging at first. It felt like it was going nowhere. I was doing it all myself, and then we worked with an outbound group. That was their specific goal, was to be out doing outbound. They weren't targeted enough. It wasn't targeted campaigns. It was too much of a shotgun approach. So we got some conversations in the door, but it just wasn't, nothing ever that closed because it wasn't targeted to what we were trying to do and targeted. I don't know whether it was the message or the effort or whatever. It didn't work for us. And so we went through a lot of failure with that, thousands and thousands of dollars that really didn't lead anywhere. We failed internally a lot. So yeah, we failed. Yeah, we failed a lot. Big differences for us were starting to hire sales professionals. So originally I was responsible for all the sales and leading the company. If I could work on products or stuff that I was like more of an expert, I'm not an expert salesperson by any means. I didn't go to school in sales. I didn't get trained in sales. I picked it up and learned as I went along. And also my focus wasn't on it 100%. So a big difference for us was hiring professional salespeople. That was a huge difference maker. Cool. And investing in that for our company. And I would say that and just persistence.
Okay. What were your professional salespeople doing that was above and beyond what was done before?
Dedication to numbers, time to dedicate to research the accounts. I would say better sales. There's like certain things that you don't realize, that I don't realize as a non-sales professional, that they just were doing that I wasn't doing. So stuff like, maybe this isn't directly to do with outbound, but an example I can think of, leaving a meeting with what do they call it? I would just call it a next step, but they have some, I don't know, industry word for it, a desired next step or it's some word for it that they use, some slang. And I wouldn't think to do that. We would be getting off the phone and I would just be like, okay, talk to you later. But no, like the sales guys are like, no, what is the next, what is that next step? So can I expect to hear from you in a couple of days? Can I call you in a couple of days? Can I, expect to see that contract coming through?
So maybe a bit of salesmanship as well as the persistence you mentioned. Okay.
The expertise that, that they spent as far as crafting messages, I think they spent a lot more time understanding what works, what doesn't work, understanding our target, and the time, as a CEO, as a founder, I wasn't dedicating nearly the amount of time that I should have been to sales. And maybe that's different in other companies. It couldn't be different in our company. I just didn't have the time. There's only so many hours in the day. Even though I was working 16-hour days, it still just wasn't enough.
How long did you wait before hiring a salesperson, and how long did that take for them to be successful or to start getting things rolling in the right way?
I waited way too long. I waited about 3 years. So yeah, I waited way too long. We really survived on a good network and luck for 3-4 years, and then we hired. And if I only knew now what I knew then, or if I only knew then what I know now, it would have been one of my first hires. And it would have been one of my main focuses too. I would have made sure that I had built the business around that I could focus more on sales and building the business than I did. And that's one of the biggest, people always preach it, and I don't think enough people do it. I think if a startup or a small company fails, it's probably because they're not focusing enough on sales. I don't know if they feel like they don't need to, or they feel like if they build it, they will come. If you build it, they won't come, right? So,
and there's also this idea that we can just throw sheer effort at a problem in order to fix it. And for a while you can, but enough, like you said, 16-hour days go by, and it's really tough to keep all the balls in the air. And yeah, I think most founders out there become founders because there's a little bit more of a drive to accomplish something, to build something. And so for a little bit too long, we think we got this, we're a superhero. And
and then you lose all your friends, and at some point your network is dead. You have to be there to make it work.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's super true. Yeah, I that definitely happened to me. I thought I could just drive things forward by nothing more than just my sheer will. And I did. I held things together by nothing more than just sheer will and persistence and thick-headedness. But it only can last so long. It probably took 6-7 months until we saw sales start to be effective, until we started to see results. So I guess if I had one bit of advice to other founders, it's to hold in, to hold on and to dig in and to not get discouraged. I think it's easy to not see those immediate results and to think, oh man, like I'm just, here's all this overhead going to sales. But for us, at least, our customers are big customers. We have long sales cycles. We have 3-month sales cycles, probably 2-3-month sales cycles. And if you don't give it time for your guys to build a book of business and to, build that pipeline and to have that pipeline start working, you'll quit before you realize the results.
You spent 3 years trying to do outbound outreach, didn't quite work out. So at some point you say, okay, I'm going to hire a salesperson to do that. And that salesperson still isn't successful for the next 6 months. It's a very long time. So it requires some sort of like belief or some faith into the system is going to work at some point. Or is it because you couldn't see any other way to make it work? What actually kept you going and keep on trying?
Man, that's a good question. Seeing it work in other organizations. Honestly, seeing organizations, this is going to sound terrible.
Good. This will be the soundbite for the show. We'll lead with this.
No. This is you can keep this in. I won't name any names, but seeing companies succeed that had a worse product and worse services than us,
and probably worse marketing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely. I was looking around at competitors thinking, how in the hell are these guys successful? They're terrible engineering best practices. These guys are just build awful products. Like, just what is going on? How can these guys grow, And realizing it's because they had an awesome sales force. And so there's a certain part of me as a founder, and I used to be a programmer for a long time. I still kind of dabble in it when I have time, just as a passion thing. But I guess having a certain respect for the craft and thinking, if I just built good enough products and did good enough engineering and we did good enough design, and if we had the top of that, that's all that would matter to bring us customers. And it was okay. It didn't hurt us, but it didn't bring any new business to the door, really. Because if you don't have people out there evangelizing those amazing things that you've built and bringing new people through the door, you just can't compete. So that was it. I just watching shit companies succeed in spite of themselves somehow. So, and realizing it was due to, really great sales processes. So.
Okay, so next follow-up question then is, how did you actually manage to hire a good salesperson? Did you try to get the salesperson from the other organization that was doing great with the shit software? It's like, hey guys, come and work with us. We're doing great software. You're gonna be even more successful. But honestly, this is something that a lot of people are struggling with. Like, how am I going about hiring, a great salesperson? And if this is your first one is a success, then like, congrats, but did you have a process, or did you just throw a dice on and see, let's see how it goes?
Well, we have some general guiding philosophies about the people we hire. We look for people that are highly intelligent, highly hungry, like really hungry and motivated, and have really high integrity. And honestly, lots of times, especially that hunger, comes from younger people. So we always say that we'll risk hiring somebody that's young, smart, and hungry over somebody that's experienced, but maybe bored and not quite as sharp, but they have that experience. A lot of people, I think, hire for that experience. They look for somebody that's 20 years in the industry and all the contacts and stuff. And we generally speaking have found that we've had better luck hiring young, smart, hungry people than anything else. And watching them and mentoring them and I guess really supporting them as they grow into that leadership position. So we take risks on those people, but it's really paid off. It's paid off with several of our leadership positions. It paid off with our sales position. We got introduced. I leveraged my network. I have standing calls with, several different people across a bunch of different industries, other professionals that I respect and really admire that I like to catch up with. And I just let everyone know I'm looking for a killer sales guy that's just going to knock it out of the park. I'm a big believer in talking about what you're looking for and talking about what you're doing. And there's, I guess, some sort of law of attraction or something that the more you do that, the more that stuff kind of finds you. And I've seen it time and time again of, well, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this. And I just tell everyone, and people ask how I'm doing, and I tell them, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm really focused on hiring a great salesperson. And you never know, you get random calls from random people. Oh, hey, I remember a couple weeks ago, you were talking about this. I came across somebody, et cetera. That's how we built a bunch of our pipeline. We also have a normal hiring pipeline, but our salesperson came from a recommendation of, somebody that I really respected, that had worked with, very high growth, good sales organizations. And he was leaving a previous position and he was moving states, and we offer remote work. So it was a good fit for him. And he was really interested in that and also interested in the chance to kind of build something from the ground up.
So Cody, for somebody listening to the show who may be in this position where they're ready to hire their first salesperson or several salespeople, since you mentioned that two of the things you look for besides intelligence was hunger and integrity, if they're maybe driving in their car right now thinking, well, that's great, but how the hell will I find someone? How will I know if they're hungry and have integrity during the interview? I'm hearing that you may be asking someone that you already respect for that referral who's going to send you someone who fits that criteria, as opposed to weeding them out in a 15-minute interview.
Yeah, I'm big on referrals. I've really found that if somebody's willing to put their name forward for somebody else and vouch for somebody else, and it's somebody that you already respect and have a good relationship with, they're probably not sending you a shit person, right? So I'm a big fan of that. Other things that I can say is, I really like to look for, that hunger. You can see that with somebody I like to talk to people about what are their favorite books, business books, right? I think certain people that are very hungry read certain types of books and can very easily name specific.
Tony Robbins.
Sorry?
Tony Robbins.
Maybe Tony Robbins. Maybe,
no, to me, that's the hunger book, right? It's like
Tony Robbins for sure. Tony Robbins, what somebody told me, the ultimate sales machine. And so I was like, okay, like this is a guy who's working in an outbound guy and really doesn't have any control over his sales organization, yet he's reading how to build a better sales organization. Like that really stood out to me. There's a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I think you only read if you really want to make something better of your life. If you come from, a certain situation, you're really trying to break out and get the different situations. So I've heard that one as an answer. really, if they have a quick answer for a book that they just love, that changed their life as far as business in general, that's somebody that's spending time outside of the work hours reading a book to become the best at what they can be, right? So really, if they have a quick, good answer for that and they can talk to it passionately, that's an indicator I use for hunger. And I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but so far it's worked for me. So Tony Robbins is a good example. I haven't heard that one. I was using examples I'd heard before, but yeah, it's probably definitely a good example.
Since we're on the topic of books, do you have any that are exceptionally helpful for you in growing your business?
That's right. What book are you reading? I want to see if you're hungry.
The book that just changed how I thought about everything and really why I started the business. Well, like what gave me the push to start the business. Although I think you have to take it a bit with a grain of salt. The general principles were solid for me. Was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It was one of those mind shifts that I guess you have throughout life where you're like, oh man, I don't know. I'd come from working as an employee, and that was a big mind shift for me. And looking back on it, I've never achieved a 4-hour work week at all.
It's a lie. It's a lie. It's the biggest scam ever.
But I'm also happier and have more control over my future than I ever did, right? As an employee.
One friend of me keep on saying, we're the type of breed that are happy to work 80 hours a week in order not to work 40 hours a week.
Yeah, exactly. There have been times where I've worked 80 hours a week, but you can be damn sure I wasn't working, 9 to 5, right? The one that I recommend to everyone, though, that I tell everyone you have to read this book, I make my salespeople read it, I make every manager in our company read it, I make every leader read it, is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. He's an ex-FBI negotiator who teaches business negotiation. The way he describes it is everyone's tendency is to try to split the difference. I want to pay 50. You want to sell me it to at 100. We're going to meet in the middle at 75. And he said, you can't do that with a life. You can't just give me back all the person except for an arm, right? Or something like that, I think is his general point. The techniques he teaches in that book have been massively helpful for me in how I think about not just negotiation, but everything in life has really become a negotiation. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I think a lot of people think of negotiation as a bad thing, but from dealing with disputes between employees to helping somebody who maybe is very bullheaded, at least understand your point of view and to maybe soften that bullheadedness a little bit to contract negotiations when you're closing a deal, too early in the sales process. I mean, that book is just phenomenal. Every person on my team has read that book and I make them read it.
We'll definitely put some links in the show notes so people can, so the listeners can check out all the books you've mentioned here. Good stuff.
All right. Great. Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Is there anything else, for our listeners interested in growth, sales, cold email, anything else you think you'd like to leave with our audience today?
One more book, which is The Ultimate Sales Machine. I think I mentioned it earlier. It's just an incredible book. My director of business development asked me to read it, and I'm only about 3/4 of the way through, but I'm just thinking, man, I made so many mistakes in the past. I would say find a mentor that has done sales before if you aren't a salesperson. If you're somebody like me who's maybe, I studied marketing, but really I was just always mostly head down working with code, my entire career. It's definitely not in sales. Find a mentor and really just be dedicated. Don't be discouraged. Invest heavily in sales. I think that every organization is a sales organization, whether they realize it or not, and invest now in it because you won't see the results for 6 months. So invest today. I can't remember the saying, but there's some saying that the only day better than yesterday is today or something like that. I would recommend that. Invest now in sales and invest heavily in sales. I mean, probably if you're listening to this podcast, you're already on the right, you're already working on it.
Right, you are.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure you're doing that, but don't give up. Be persistent in it and measure, adjust, learn, and continue forward. So, I mean, that for us was, that bullheadedness and that persistence was what really eventually brought it home.
All right, Cody, thanks so much. So you heard it, guys. If you've been reading The 4-Hour Workweek, Never Split the Difference, you're highly intelligent, hungry, and got integrity, then go and apply at Codelitt for outbound What's the title exactly?
Opportunity Development Representative.
There you go. Thanks, Cody.
Cody, it's been great having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing some insights with our audience.
Excellent. Thank you guys for having me. It's great to meet you both and great to talk with you. Can't wait to hear future podcasts too.
Awesome.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
So they can send awesome emails.
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.